Introduce myself. I'm Nancy Eiring. I come from Fuse Fundraising, a nonprofit fundraising consulting agency that helps small, medium, large organizations with their direct response fundraising. So that spans from direct mail to email to paid media to canvassing to DRTV. I'm from New Jersey. I grew up in Monmouth County and Little Silver, and so I'm a big fan of the New Jersey landscape of organizations. I have done nonprofit since I graduated college. I got my start at a local public television station in Washington, D.C., WETA, and I went from there to a nonprofit fundraising agency where I worked with environmental organizations like Greenpeace, Sierra Club, as well as very progressive causes. I got the political bug while I was working at this agency. I worked on my first Senate race, Hillary Clinton for New York. And from there, I worked on a lot of political campaigns. I went from Hillary to Emily's List to presidential campaigns where I like to say I helped elect the next Secretary of State. So I worked on Kerry and Hillary's first presidential race. Um, I aged out of political campaigns and started working at the Nature Conservancy where I was head of acquisition, donor acquisition for the national organization. So I would oversee fundraising efforts to acquire new donors from different channels, from different walks of life. I also started the Nature Conservancy's first membership program outside of the US in Australia. Um, Having been in DC for more than any one place in my life, and as I was traveling to Australia, I decided that I needed a change, and I went from the East Coast to the West Coast, where I worked for the Surfrider Foundation as their director of membership. Um, I found that the West Coast was not for Nancy Eiring. So I was able to relocate to the center of the country where I am today, just outside of Denver, Colorado. And after Surfrider, I did some consulting, like for the League of Conservation Voters. And now I'm at Fuse, where I work with nonprofits on their fundraising programs. I heard a lot of different roles here today from people introducing themselves, and I am going to be talking about new donor acquisition. So at any point in time, please stop me if you have any questions. If I use an acronym, you're like, what is that? So please, I would like this to be a conversation versus me just talking at people. That's better for me as well as presenting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. And let me get this in presenting mode. Oops. Here we go. So first and foremost, this is all about donor acquisition. And so it's about how donors are coming into the organization. And the focus today is hopefully to give you some guidelines of how to build an acquisition program, how to measure the success of those efforts. Acquisition is an investment in an organization, so measuring success is absolutely critical. Some testing best practices, and hopefully to walk away with either how to implement these different programs into your organization or to refine them so that you can grow revenue to support the mission of your organization. Sound good? Good. All right. So when we think about the essentials for an acquisition program, there may be more than these four, but when we think about the real drivers of acquisition, it starts with the audience, then creative. Seasonality comes into play, the time of year, what events are happening, and then the other element is measurement. So when we think about audience is identifying the prospects of who is most likely to donate to your organization. And that can come from outside lists or models. I will talk about models a lot today. When I speak about models, there are um, these big donor universes out there that a couple of cooperative databases manage. And when you contribute your donor data, you can get data back from these co-ops. And these co-ops provide lookalikes of your donors. So they're these machine generated AI models of who will be a likely donor to your organization. So I will get into that a little bit more, but that is what a lot of organizations, big and small, are using to drive their acquisition programs because it's an efficient way to identify the best of the best. This is also a way to engage non-financial supporters, those lead gens that you're trying to acquire for advocacy efforts, volunteers, like the boots on the ground. Creative is really important. It is what it is your case for support. Why should someone donate to your organization? And creative is important because it has to stand out inside that cluttered mailbox, inside a cluttered meta of ads, or if you're doing programmatic, sitting outside of a news feed and getting your prospects' attention very quickly. Seasonality is important. Many organizations look at the end of year as driving for their acquisition as alongside their house, the appeals to their existing donors during the October through December 31st time period. As environmental organizations, you could look to leveraging one of the many environmental holidays, I would call them, like World Water Day, World Environment Day, World Wildlife Day. There are so many different Earth Day. There are so many different ways to engage donors at different points of time when your organization is relevant to them. The other piece is measuring the success of your programs. It's very important to have reporting in place so that you can see how these campaigns are doing, not only on the short term, but on the long term. Because as I mentioned previously, acquisition is an investment. You typically do not net money on an acquisition campaign. It usually is a net loss. And you have to think about like, what is your threshold for that net loss? We'll talk about that in a second. For all acquisition, it is as well as for appeals and making those appeals to existing donors, it's important to be testing, and testing can be done in two different ways. One is performance and the other is efficiency. I like to think of performance as those game changers. If you have a control message that you're constantly putting out to your donors, you are seeing some fatiguing results. You want to test new, different messaging and really test them head to head. And that would fall into performance testing. For efficiency testing, this is where you're just refining your message, you're refining what ask amount you're asking for, you're refining the look and feel of that control message. I saw someone get off mute. Did someone have a question? No? Okay. I'm just going to talk a minute about testing misconceptions. A lot of organizations are always under this pressure to constantly be testing to evolve their programs. Testing does not come lightly. It is not always valuable. It does take a lot of cost from a resource perspective as well as versioning of a package of either new creative or new ads. It is a lot. And so it's important to think about testing as having a roadmap for it, and whether you're just making that entry into donor acquisition, or if you have an established program, it's important to put together a roadmap and really think about what you want to test and what is most valuable to you and the organization. Is it most important to drive in as many donors as possible at whatever cost, or is it important to make sure that the investment per donor is at a certain threshold? And that certain threshold is, what cost would you pay to acquire a donor? Knowing that in this environment, it's becoming more and more difficult to retain donors. So just thinking about testing in a way that is very thoughtful and always thinking about the bottom line. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about measuring success. There are many key performance indicators that you can look at for acquisition. These, I would say, are the top 5. So in thinking about each one plays a role in measuring success. So response rate is the first one. This is the percent of people who are responding to a campaign. So this is the new donors divided by the total volume for direct mail. Response rate translates into the digital space as conversion rate. Same sort of metric, but calculated slightly differently. Response rate is important because it is purely about the number of donors coming into the organization, and it is really important to know what number of new donors you need to come into an organization year over year, because you will be losing donors. And that is called coverage ratio. Coverage ratio is the number of new donors coming in versus the number of donors that you have lost. And you want to make sure that you know how many new donors you need each year annually, and what that would look like if you want to grow the organization. Average gift is an important indicator because it is the potential value of that new donor, not only in its first year, but for long term. What we like to say is that a higher average gift will indicate a high value donor from the onset. Someone who gives you $50 is going to be more value than the person who is giving you $10 initially. And I know that seems like very evident, but it is important when thinking about the response rate. If you're bringing in a lot of donors, you have a high response rate, but your average gift is $10, it may be a problem in the long term because you just brought in all these new donors that may not retain year over year. Investment per donor is very important. This is the net revenue. So at the end of the day, from what you have sitting in the bank from this campaign, so it's net revenue is gross revenue minus costs. So it's net revenue divided by the number of new donors. This is your investment per donor, and you want to have a threshold of how high you would go to invest in one donor. This is important because when you're thinking about this investment, if you're bringing in a high average gift but a low response rate, your investment per donor is going to be much higher than that response rate that is really high, but the average gift is much lower. So it's all these different metrics playing as different levers of what you're thinking about, how you're measuring success. Return on investment, this is the return of your the financial return compared to your costs. This again, like, it's thinking about it like it as your checking account. How how are you spending your money wisely here? The last one is long-term value, LTV. This is the value of a donor over its course of years. You want to see that value increase year over year through a couple of different metrics. That is the number of gifts that they're giving to you, as well as the average gift. That donor value should be increasing depending on where the donor is in its life cycle with the organization. So a newer donor, so a donor that you acquired last year, its value would be a little bit lower than that donor that has been giving to an organization consecutively. I'm going to sit there for a second. If there are any questions, just raise your hand or scream out. No questions?
Nancy, can I go back? This is Denise. I'm the
Yes.
executive director of Morris Park Alliance in Morris County. Can I go back real quick just to the testing part? So what you're talking about there is like doing a campaign, but creating perhaps two messages. So A/B testing to see which
Yes.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So when you're thinking about performance testing, think about it as completely different packages. So when you're doing the A/B, the A would be your control, something that is tried and true, and B would be completely different. If you're doing A/B testing on efficiency, you're taking that tried and true control and just making some modifications, whether it's if you have an insert in the control and you're trying to lower the cost of the package, you're taking out that insert, or you're testing the ask amounts in the letter, or you're testing personalization versus a pre-printed letter. So you're really, breaking out the testing in two different ways, in two different buckets, so that you're accomplishing different things here. So on a performance, you're really trying to have a game changer and improve that response rate, improve the average gift on both sides. On efficiency, you're looking for that investment per donor to be reduced because you're doing some efficiencies in your testing.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks for asking a question. I appreciate it. Any more? Okay. All right. So I think just in life, there needs to be a game plan for fundraising. Every organization should be looking at their acquisition program with a couple of different strategic considerations. In this market, things are changing very quickly. So really being, having a focus on tomorrow, thinking about like long-term revenue growth, but being grounded in the results today. We have seen a lot of changes in the digital space where paid search, SEM, used to be that third channel where people would look at. Now it's a primary channel for fundraising and bringing in donors from the onset. So really being nimble on changing strategies as they're happening in real life. The other piece is not all donors hold the same equal value. We have done a lot of what we call file health analysis and looking at new donor retention, donor value for direct mail acquired donors and digitally acquired donors. Direct mail donors have this bad reputation of being a high investment per donor. They're not going to stay around, and digital is where everyone needs to be at. Well, direct mail is not dead. It has not been dead for the last 25 years since I've been working in this space, and everybody has been saying that digital is where you should be putting your money. The analysis that we have seen is, direct mail donors have a higher first year retention rate. They have a higher consecutive rate against the digitally acquired cohorts. You can bring in the masses through digital, but if if you have a 10 to 15% retention rate on a digital donor, that means you're losing 90, 85% of your donors that you're acquiring. The numbers are not so much better on the direct mail side, but they are. Direct mail donors have a higher retention rate. So their retention rate for their first year is somewhere between 20 and 25. So yes, you are losing 80 to 85%. Not the best, but the value for that donor is much higher, meaning that they're giving at higher average gifts, they're giving more frequently. So when you're evaluating your program and looking at those different measures of success, you want to be looking and thinking about that, second year, third year value and where you should be investing in your programs. The other piece is what the coverage ratio. Knowing what donors you're losing year over year is absolutely critical, and making sure you're replenishing them so that you're at least making up the same amount of revenue year over year. If you want to grow your revenue from direct response, you're going to have to not only replenish, but replenish and then some, in order to see the gains year over year versus, staying at par. Does that make sense? Attribution is looking at where donors may be giving outside of the vehicle of where you're asking them to give. So if you're sending a direct mail letter, you're also looking to see and attribute a gift from a different source. We know donors are giving a lot more through their donor advised funds. We know donors see a direct mail piece and they go online either through a QR code, a URL provided, or just organically. It's important to be evaluating your acquisition programs holistically and not just from that channel. I learned this very interesting fact, that 40% of the gifts, 40% of gifts from a direct mail campaign are going elsewhere. That 40%. So if you're looking at an acquisition, direct mail acquisition campaign just by itself, it may not look great, but when you do that attribution, you can really see that true performance of the campaign. So it's important to see, from any measurement that you can, whether it's just digitally, very broadly, or digitally through email, through QR codes, through URLs, looking at it and evaluating holistically. People are just on so many devices and everywhere these days, and we've given them every opportunity to get through many different ways. We have to evaluate it in that same fashion that we're giving people those opportunities. Okay, I'm going to spend a little bit on direct mail acquisition. So direct mail acquisition, in the broadest way of looking at it, it starts from ordering these lists or ordering models, really working on how to create that prospect audience, then developing creative, and then moving to mail production. That's working with a printer, a data processor to make sure those lists are as clean as possible, and then you move into the mailing. This third part of the journey is really analyzing the results and looking at response rates by audience segment, looking at investment per donor, and seeing how everything is performing. The other piece here is doing attribution and making sure that we're looking at the program holistically. The fourth part in the journey is refining and doing it again. It is important to have a stable acquisition program where you're looking at the program, over a year period, 12 months, and thinking about when can you do certain acquisition campaigns. I would say you can't just do one a year. You have to think about like multiple touch points throughout a year and thinking about when is that seasonality best for your organization. So end of year, prime period of time to do donor acquisition. But also if you're an organization that focuses on clean water, March may be a great month for you. If you're an organization that works on trails and open spaces, it might be May, June, when people are starting to like get out of their winter coats and wanting to hit the trails and get outside. Just so being really thoughtful about like when the acquisition campaigns happen. I would also say you don't want to just invest in 1 month everything. You want to be making sure that you're testing throughout the year on seasonality, and that would be an efficiency test where you're putting a smaller volume in an unknown month for you and making sure that the juice is worth the squeeze there. So targeting the right prospect audiences. So I spoke earlier about co-op models. If you've never have been exposed to a co-op model and are very much interested in learning more, please reach out to me and I can help put you in touch with two firms that we use most regularly. They take a donor audience and it has to be of a certain volume. So if you have 5,000 donors or more, they're more likely to be able to do a model. If they cannot do a model, they can provide prospects back on other environmental cause models that they have. Co-op models are the most efficient these days because they are really looking at data from so many different ways. And this may give you an ick factor, but we all know that our data is out there. People know more about us than we know about ourselves. They know they know our ages, they know our demographics, they know our lifestyles, they know where we're buying, and that's how they're creating these models. They know so much about us. It's big brother at play, but I like to think of it as big brother at play in a good fashion because we're getting donors. Co-ops are These donor co-ops are a mass contribution of other organizations contributing their donor data blindly. So let's just say, for example, the Nature Conservancy, Sierra Club, WWF, all of these ginormous environmental organizations, they're all contributing the data. We don't know where the data is, when we get a model from a co-op, we don't know if it's WWF or UNICEF. We just know that your donor profile matched a donor inside this co-op, and they created a model off of it. So it is very AI generated, machine learning generated. And it's the reason why these co-op models are now make up, anywhere from 75% of an organization's prospecting audience. There are outside lists where you can rent a list or exchange with other organizations. This is, a higher cost prospect, and it's a little bit less targeted. So you're making a call on, I'm just going to say New Jersey LCV, exchanging a list with an open space or a trail organization. We just don't know if it's a one-to-one match. And it's very less targeted, but it does make up a prospect audiences. And I know that from a smaller organization perspective, it's easier to do those exchanges with other like-minded organizations and have that exchange balance going from time to time. The next piece is really thinking about, what's going to stand out. I don't know if many of you are like me. I am getting tons and tons of mail right now from every single organization under the sun. I've learned of some new ones in my state, which was really exciting. But here's what I did. I just pulled out what was sitting um, in my inbox and what I've been seeing come through. So it just everything that I have seen is like bold creative on the outer envelope. So something that is very personalized to something that has a teaser to a cute little otter. These are things that will make the offer stand out. These they're very engaging, they're very visual. When you get inside the envelope, what is important is that emotional storytelling. And having worked at a couple of environmental organizations, I will say sometimes the organization wants to say everything to the prospect and tell them everything that they're doing. If you think about it as your first date with a prospect, you do not want to share all of your baggage. You do not want to tell them everything about yourself up until the time you're meeting on your first date. You just want to tease out your best story and have something really engaging. For environmental defense, they use the story of butterflies to talk about climate change. For Chesapeake Bay, they're using otters as telling their stories. For Surfrider, they're talking about water. So think about what is the most compelling story that your organization has. What was something that you've done that has been so impactful and that you continue to do, and you're the only one who could tell that story. Having emotional, personal stories is also very important. It puts the donor in the prospect into what that, into that story and how they can help make an impact for another person. The other piece is having those tangible asks of a donor's gift. And when I say tangible ask, it's like $25 can do. Doesn't restrict a gift, but it just gives them a sense of what impact their donation will have. And if you didn't see a matching gift during Giving Tuesday, I would like to see your inbox. But every organization has been leveraging not only match offers online, but they have moved into not only appeals, but acquisition campaigns. So having that match offer is has been very successful for every organization that has deployed it alongside that deadline. So those are some of the things I would say when you're evaluating the creative of your direct mail, whether it's acquisition or even to existing donors, just, go through this checklist and think about how does your campaign level up to that. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about paid media digital acquisition. And I would say this, for paid media, like there's several advantages here. It's a very efficient way to do acquisition, more so than direct mail. It has a lower cost barrier, so you don't have to spend as much as you are for a direct mail campaign, and you have greater access to targeting. You can look at demographics, you can look at interest base, you could load in your existing CRM list. And when I say CRM list, I mean your existing donors, both current and lapse, to target them for an additional gift. But you can also use that to create a lookalike targeting. And then you can also leverage your website visitors who are coming to the site and not making a gift. It does have a lot more advantages than direct mail. Even though I'm a direct mail a direct mail person inside and out, I will say if you do not have a direct mail acquisition program and you want to get started somewhere, I would say paid media is the place to go. It's just a lower cost barrier overall. And you can do a lot of creative testing, seeing what resonates. You can also find audiences that are going to resonate. But you also have to, when you do the acquisition for inside not only direct mail, but also for paid media, you have to have a plan for what happens after they join the organization, and very quickly, especially with paid media. So when we think about paid media considerations, everything needs to work together. So there is, when we think about the marketing funnel, it comes into play here with paid media. So programmatic, which is display ads on news sites, lifestyle blogs. Like, think about if you go to the New York Times, you always see ads. That is programmatic. So programmatic is usually top of the funnel, where you're just trying to get brand awareness out there for your organization. The middle part of the funnel is Meta, Instagram, and paid SEM. And then the bottom part of the funnel is retargeting both the people in the middle and the top of the funnel. And that is where you see the conversions to donors. There is great targeting and segmentation here, but it does not always work as it does in direct mail, because you are casting that wider net of people, and you're just going in and trying to get impressions. You are trying to get impressions along with conversions, but for the most part, it is an impression based business here. And there's more competition inside the paid media space. I mean, many organizations saw that leading up to the election, but also right now as we're in the thick of end of year giving. Just a quick overview of Meta. So Meta refers to the locations within the Meta family. So thinking about Messenger, Instagram, the audience network, you can buy specific placements within this, or you can have Meta Advantage do the optimization for you. Meta used to be the primary place to prospect for donors for nonprofits, but of late, Meta has really fallen off. So it's important that when you're thinking about your paid media mix, that you're thinking holistically, because you have the ability to be nimble, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So think about your paid media strategy holistically. So Meta campaigns, they can run from, I'm sure everyone knows this. So if you don't, if you do, and I'm just beating this, please let me know. So for creative here, you can test a couple of different ad types, from a single image to carousel to short video ads. For organizations that have been in Meta for a long time and have been doing just one type of ad, I would say it'd be great to test the other different ad types, because they are always constantly fluctuating in terms of what is working and what is not working. Best practice here is, and Meta also provides this guidance and guidelines for both creative and copy, but for the single ad or single image ads, making sure that the text doesn't take up more than 20%, having carousel ads work in conjunction with one another, meaning every image inside the carousel plays off one another, and having those carousel ads be tied to specific offers and purposes. So thinking about like how each image plays off of one another and what offer is being built within those ads. And then for video, the shorter the better. People do not have a great attention span, which is pretty sad. We have seen ads that are short as 16, even down to 9 seconds, being really effective, more effective than 30 second ads. It is really hard to get a case for support in 9 seconds, so you have to be uber creative there. But I think at the most important thing is, again, thinking about like what we were talking about for direct mail, making sure it stands out, that it's visual, that you have that compelling case for support, and that you have a strong CTA, whether it's for a donation or if you're doing lead generation. Lead ads are an effective way to grab someone at the top of the funnel and start moving them through. So let's just say you want to do a lead ad on plastic pollution and have them sign a petition. That is a great way. You'll get their name, address, and email and phone number, and you can move them through that like conversion track where the next email that they receive from the organization is about what you're doing to stop plastic pollution and make that case for support there. So Meta can be really good for lead gen. It is getting a little bit more expensive these days. Usually it used to be that you could get a solid lead anywhere from $1.50 to $3. Now it's becoming a little bit higher, closer to $5 or more. As I mentioned, Meta has guidelines for copy length within their different ads. So the copy text at the top, they say 120 characters. That is what you're going to see. You don't want that copy to be truncated and make the prospect who is viewing your ad do more work to click on see more. I mean, it's silly that we don't want people to do more work, as silly as that sounds, but it is more successful if you follow the guidelines one-to-one. Next, we're going to talk about paid search. So as I mentioned before, paid search is also known as SEM. Google provides Google grants. If your organization does not have a Google grant, it is a very simple process, and I can provide that application as a follow-up. I would highly recommend you apply for it. It is free money. The Google grant is secondary. It's great to have because it is free money, but we do recommend that you still leverage Google and Bing to do bidding on search terms. So, brand terms will be always the most efficient. And when we say brand terms, it's the name of your organization or iterations of your organization. And the non-brand terms are things that you would associate with your organization. So pulling up, like if you're working on trails and open space, you may want to talk about some of the most popular trails. You might want to talk about having a brand term on hiking, like anything that is secondary to what you would say about your organization outside of the name of the organization. Paid search is a way to like capture the user when they're trying to find information about your organization or something about the mission of the organization. And you really want to pull that into your paid media or paid search strategy. There is definitely a strategy to this. I am not an SEM expert. I have very, very smart colleagues who do this for their work day in and day out. So if you have any questions on SEM paid search, please let me know and I can put you in touch with one of my colleagues. And this is like the anatomy of what a paid search campaign looks like in terms of having, your headlines, the URLs. This would be best practice for having a solid paid search or Google ad in action. So there is a headline for every campaign. You have a URL displayed. You have extensions. You could have an ad description. It is amazing to see when you're just doing keywords, the call outs and the snippets and the address and the site links, how it all comes together. Okay. Lastly, I would say having done acquisition for more than 25 plus years, the best thing to do about acquisition is be scrappy. And what I mean by be scrappy, it means, try not to reinvent the wheel every single time. Be efficient in the testing, your audiences. Um, I'm sorry, hold on one second. My mail is being delivered. So, if you do not have budget for an audience looking towards, like-minded organizations and making friends with those organizations to build that exchange, to start with digital. If you don't really have a large investment, really thinking about all the different ways to keep costs at a minimum, because acquisition is not cheap. I would also say pack patience. Pack patience just in general in life is probably a good mantra, but definitely pack patience when testing. And I would say never fall in love with your tests. Once you do, that test is probably going to fail. I can't tell you how many times I have fallen in love with like beautifully done packages and then the white outer envelope wins. Like, don't get hung up on your tests. And when you are seeing strong results within your acquisition campaign, keep going because you never know when there's going to be a shift in performance. The industry has seen great fluctuations from quarter to quarter. We saw what happened during COVID. COVID shook everything up. So it's really important to like keep momentum going and go and invest. If you're seeing a positive net return on acquisition, that is something where I would say keep it moving as quickly as possible because you never know when you're going to see that again. Um, I would also say it's important to advocate for a continued investment in acquisition, whether you're advocating that to the executive director or to the board of directors. It's important to make sure that you're a strong advocate for the fundraising program because no one else will advocate for acquisition. Acquisition is always the first line item to be cut from a budget because it does not provide net revenue. And so that's why advocating for it is important. It's also important if you're being held to budget goals year over year, that if you're going to lose that 90% of your digitally acquired donors, the 80% of your direct mail acquired donors, you need to be filling that void year after year. And I would say this as someone who had a lot of influencers when I sat at a nonprofit, particularly a very small organization, everybody was a fundraiser and knew the program better than me. And they knew that we should have been testing this message or that message. So, It's important for you to stand your ground when you have those outside voices, whether it's the board of directors or sometimes even your colleagues. It's just important that you stand your ground. That was the last slide of my deck, and I'm just gonna stop sharing so I can see your faces and we can have a conversation on questions or anything you'd like.
I don't have a question, but that was a really great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Nancy, can I go back to the co-op model? I'm a very small organization, as are, I'm sure, many of my friends on the call. And actually, my donors are usually one-off donors. We support programs in the parks, we support projects in the parks, so people will connect to that particular program or project.
Mhm.
So when you first started talking about the co-op things, I was like, wow, that would be really cool. But now, the second half of it was, I don't have 5,000 donors. So could you go back again as to, the kinds of things that we could do as smaller organizations?
And Denise, I would say the co-op may not be off limits to you. You may need to get more of a potential lookalike model. They may have these, I would say, established environmental list or environmental donor prospect list that is based on your geography, based on some demographic or lifestyle that about your donors. If they're interested in parks, I would say don't think of it as being off limits. They may have alternatives for you, but there is also looking at organizations within New Jersey or actually in the tri-state area and coming up with exchanges. So you work at the Eastern Environmental Law Center. Are there any other environmental organizations within your circumference that potentially has a strong interest in the work that you're doing that you could do an exchange with? And you provide your donors to them and they provide their donors back to you.
Can I ask a question following up on that? Adrian Novak, our organization's Grow Green Morristown, another very small agricultural focused organization. When you're looking at the idea of sharing donor, trading donor lists, what about just the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, there's another organization just like us, sure, let's see what they've got. But on the one hand, we're sort of competing with some of those folks, especially in a limited area. And we like our colleagues and we don't want to poach their donors. And if someone's got, a couple dollars to give, want to make sure that those folks are continuing to support those things. So how do you, I guess, in the practical sense of approaching another organization to say, do you want to do a list swap or however that would be? Like, how would you, I guess, how would you propose one small organization approaching another small organization that's like-minded, or should really be looking for complementary, not truly overlapping?
I would say both. So an environmental donor gives to at least 8 organizations or more. So there's already this competition for a donor and their gift. When you're partnering with a like-minded organization, it's important to think about how can we work together for a mutually beneficial need? And we both want new donors coming in. We also have periods of time that are important to us for fundraising. So potentially your organization does a mailing in October and their mailing is in December, and or vice versa, whatever works best for you. I would also look at other nonprofits inside your area that may not fit the puzzle piece that you have for your mission. So they may not be an environmental organization, maybe they're a hospital, well, hospital may be wrong, but maybe a cultural, a museum, a recreation, and see if there's an opportunity there to do an exchange.
Thank you. That makes sense.
I know we're at time. I will send out this deck, and I will, if you have questions or need support, or, want to reach out to one of the different co-ops that are out there, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help you in any fashion I can.
Thank you, Nancy, for having us. Be on the lookout for that email, this recording, as well as the materials here. We'll see everybody next year.
Yeah, thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thanks,
Thank
Lauren.
you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Bye, everyone. Thank you,
Okay.
Nancy.
Bye-bye.